Hello, everyone. We're just going to take a moment to let everyone in. Hello, hello. Okay, I think we can get started. Hello again, and welcome to the first presentation of the 2023 CUNY Accessibility Conference. So for today's session, or for this session at 11 a.m., we will be having a presentation by Isaac Zablocki titled Making Film More Accessible. My name is Tanya Kalaitzidis, and I will be the moderator for this session, along with my colleague, Andrew Muller. Before we begin, I first would like to go over some housekeeping items. First, the session will be recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, you may keep your camera and microphone off, which is the default setting for the webinar. You may also change your name if you do not want your current name visible in the live transcript. Live transcription is active for the session. You may turn on captions by selecting Show Captions at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you do not see this option, select More or stretch your Zoom window wider. ASL interpreting is available for this session. Similar to captions, you may view the interpreters by selecting Interpretation at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you are using a screen reader, please adjust your alerts and notifications accordingly in your Zoom accessibility settings. The webinar settings allow for saving the chat so that you can opt out of alerts during the presentation if you wish. Lastly, if you are experiencing any technical issues, please message the hosts in the chat so that our tech support team can do their best to assist. For questions, please enter them in the Q&A, as the chat will not be closely monitored for questions. If you require video to sign your question or microphone access to voice your question, please use the raise your hand reaction so that we can update your Zoom settings during the Q&A, and we will let you know when it is time to speak or sign. If you would like to share relevant resources or links with others, you may post that information into the chat. And lastly, if you are experiencing any technical issues, please message the hosts in the chat so that our tech support team can do their best to assist. I think I said that already, right? It is now my pleasure to introduce Isaac Zablocki. Isaac is the Director of Film Programs at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan, with a rich background in multiple aspects of the film industry. After graduating from Columbia University's film school, he worked at Miramax Films and later produced and directed feature films while also developing educational programs for the Department of Education. He has been instrumental in shaping the film landscape at JCC Manhattan, including the establishment of the Israel Film Center and the annual programming of several film festivals, such as Other Israel Film Festival, which highlights the stories of Arab and underrepresented populations in Israel, and the Real Abilities Film Festival, the largest festival in the world showcasing films by and about people with disabilities. Isaac, whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Thank you all for having me here. I'm honored to be here. I'm going to try to speak slowly. That's really hard for me. I'll start with the self-description. I'm a white, I think middle-aged male in a blue suit and a blue button-down shirt. I usually do not dress this formally, but tonight is the opening night of Real Abilities, so you caught me on a good day. And I have a white background. Thank you so much for joining. And we're talking about accessibility in film. And I'll start by sharing that We're experiencing a revolution right now. This is an amazing time. I am proud to be the founder of the Real Abilities Film Festival. And Real Abilities has been running for 15 years. And we have watched, many have been doing the work before us, but we have watched for the last 15 years how this industry is changing and is hitting a real moment here. And we're excited to be a part of that moment and excited to talk about how accessibility, how we can just make this more than a moment and a real sea change, a real shift in our culture. I'm going to give a little bit of background on the importance of film in terms of accessibility, and then I'll jump into actually some real technicalities, if that's okay. And I think educators would tell me that it would be wrong to be talking about film without showing a film. So we're going to share a little short film as well, so that I think kind of touches on some of the points that I'm looking to make here. I'm also happy to say that I was present for most of Troy's presentation, this last presentation, and very much the work that we're doing follows the work and overlaps with the work that he was talking about in terms of creating accessibility. I'll say also we love the concept of universal design, but here at Real Abilities also every year we're taking it up, and some people use the term fully accessible. I even automatically write sometimes the festival is fully accessible. I don't think there's such a thing as fully accessible. We're always learning. We're always taking things to a new level every year. We've been doing this for 15 years, and every year we're finding new ways and trying out new ways to be more accessible, knowing also that one thing that works for one person doesn't work for another person, and possibly can actually be in the way for another person. So it's always keeping that balance. And we also try to adopt this concept of individual design as well. We're looking at each individual person and seeing how best can we serve that individual. And I think that fits into a lot of what Troy was saying too, in terms of everyone's specific needs and how everyone is different. I myself also, important to share, identify as someone who's neurodiverse. I have a learning disability, and I'm very familiar with the experience. And also, if I identified as a person who's now somehow middle-aged, obviously went to school at a very different time and am just so proud of how much has changed since then. And I could get into my own personal stuff too, but today we're really talking about film. So the film industry, as I mentioned, is experiencing a revolution. Who here has seen Coda? Give me some hearts for Coda, winning the Academy Award. That was the moment for us of really there we go, a nice wave of hearts, of really putting disability in the spotlight and doing it in a responsible, authentic way, which is so important and something that it was not always done in Hollywood. That's on the side of both what's nice about Coda, both in the filmmaking of Coda and in actually the presentation of Coda. There was extra emphasis put into accessibility. And this is something that Real Abilities has been doing both sides of that for years. Real Abilities both tries to present films that aren't being presented, bringing disability into the mainstream through movies. Everybody loves movies, right? Let's agree on that one. There's always that one person who doesn't like, I don't like movies. I don't know what to, then I can't talk to that person. And of course, there's also how it's being presented. What kind of accessibility is being used so everyone can enjoy these films? So it's not only the concept of inclusion, but rather also creating inclusion. And I'll say that this is all, even at this time of a revolution, an uphill battle. The ADA, of course, passed 33 years ago. And that was a monumental legal change. Now it's about the cultural change, and we're all a part of that, making sure that our world is more accepting and more accessible, and our community is more accessible. I'll say the sad side of it all. I live in a very progressive community here in New York, and And I hear things about the disability community that would not be said about any other minority population. Even in the film industry, a few years back, there was a real push for the Oscars to be more inclusive. And disability was forgotten from the list at first. They corrected that, and then they showed all the love, I think, with awarding CODA last year. By the way, our opening night for tonight, we are honoring Troy Kutzer, who is the star of CODA, who won an Academy Award for CODA, and he's going to be with us tonight at our opening night. I'll share everything at the end. Remind me a moment at the end to share all the information for those who have questions more about Real Abilities. I'm sorry for the constant plugs, but obviously there's a lot of good connections here, and we've made it really accessible for all of you to attend in any way. And I love to use Real Abilities also as an example of doing things that a lot of other places are not doing. So I'm going to start by, first of all, I'm going to go through the process of film from beginning to end, knowing that Real Abilities is a film festival. We're at the end. We're at the exhibition side where we show films and how to make that side accessible. But the whole process really has been exclusive up until now, and we'll be talking about how that process is exclusive. And I think the best thing for me to do is take this moment to share a short movie. This is a 7-minute movie, so don't blink. It's funny. It's a mockumentary, so please do laugh. It's called The Milky Pop Kid. We showed this a couple of years ago at our festival. I'm really sorry to say that I couldn't get access at the moment to our, we make all of our films, we show them with open captions and have audio description too. I couldn't get access to the audio description version for a technical reason, and I really apologize for that. For all the films that we're going to show during the lunch break, like all of our films, there will be an audio described version for those who are blind or with vision loss. We try to make all of our events, of course, as accessible as possible. So I'm going to share my screen for a moment and let you enjoy 7 minutes of Milky Pop Kid that talks really about some of the process of filmmaking. And I'm really proud to say the most important thing is that this film is not only about disability, it was made by disabled people, the cast, the crew, all sides of it. So it's really coming from within in first person. So you're going to see a countdown of 10 seconds, and that's because in the older days, technology has evolved. In order for us to show audio description, which just proves that we do have audio description for this one, to show audio description, we needed to sync it up with a countdown. So I keep that countdown up there just to remember the good old days and to show off our accessibility a little bit. So please enjoy. Thank you. Thank you for all the love. I loved it. For those of you, sarcasm doesn't always translate, and irony. For those of you who were questioning, his behavior is not good. He is an example. That's the joke there. I'm glad most of you got that, applauded that, and hopefully laughed from it a little bit, because that's important too. And in a nice way, comedy is a great way to bring a message. This film is packed with messages. I've seen it 100 times, and it's amazing what I learn every time I see it. And I, by the way, love your comments. Please bring them. I can't follow and speak at the same time, but please be a part. Questions, please ask them in the Q&A, and we'll take time for all of that as well. But just a couple of things that I want to point out from this film as a way to kind of like dive into this topic is, first of all, he starts off by saying how disabilities are highly underrepresented, and this is true. I think we're up to 5% now of representation in media, when it used to be 2% or lower, and that's out of a community that represents 25% of the country. So that's an important thing, that there's underrepresentation. Of course, he's part of the problem. He says that he likes to hold up a mirror through film, which is actually one of the more true things that he said, because film is a mirror. Film is a mirror to our society, and if we, people with disabilities are not being seen in film, then we're not being seen in society. It trickles down. Life mimics art quite often. And he says, so you can see me. So you can see an inauthentic representation of disability. That's what he thought was the plan there. Of course, the film also starts off with our star not being able to be called to a space that she can't access. I can't tell you how many times I've heard of actors showing up to auditions in spaces. I mean, New York has a lot of historic buildings that are just not accessible, and we have to make sure that from the very beginning, the whole process is accessible on every level. From when people are beginning, this is even before casting, pre-production of a movie, how to make a movie accessible from the beginning. The writers and producers, first of all, you're writing about the topic of disability. Even if you're not writing about the topic of disability, it should be fully accessible. So writers with disabilities can get their foot in the door, can start their careers. So crew with disability can get their foot in the door and actually have a career in film and learn to master the art. And that's crucial for us. You know, you saw this film, high quality filmmaking. They knew what they were doing. And we like great production. There's no reason for a film made by people with disabilities to not be of the highest quality. I mean, really, from the very, if you're making a film about a person with disability and you're making it without people with disabilities from the very beginning, something's not right there. You're not going to tell a good story. You might be able to tell a very good Hollywood cliche, but there'll be no humanity there. There'll be no truth there. He gives in the film the example of Rain Man, which is my pet peeve film, which love Dustin Hoffman, fabulous actor. But the film itself did so much damage to the autism community because for so many years, anybody, and I don't know how many of you have seen Rain Man, which is an Academy Award-winning film, but and this shouldn't be a speech that makes you see the film, but it was really about someone who had autism and that was savant and a very, very, very unique kind of autism. And since then, if you say that you're autistic, people immediately think that you can that you have a special talent or can count how many matches are on the ground when it falls out of a matchbox, or can count cards in poker as they do in the film. And this is kind of what this film is, this movie, The Milky Pop Kid, is trying to poke at, these kind of representations and misrepresentations. And Hollywood has really used, like in this film, actors have used it as a way to get awards. And that leaves out people with disability from getting awards. If the wonderful Daniel Day-Lewis, fabulous actor, is taking the one role that was written for somebody with cerebral palsy, that means that the actor with cerebral palsy is never going to get to have a chance and be a star. The writing, to me, I'm a big believer in storytelling, and I think that's the most important part of filmmaking. And the writers and directors also should be a part of the community. And it's not black and white. I understand there's a lot of gray in our world, and not every disability can be fully represented. Not every story has to be completely made by only sometimes the person with the disability being depicted can't direct the film because of their disability. That can happen. And, I know somebody who's a director who can't leave their house, so they're going to have trouble. But first of all, there's amazing technology out there that's going to allow people to direct from afar. It's already happening. But also it means just make it a team effort. I'm not a believer that films are made only by the director. This needs to be a team, and the team needs to be inclusive. And every step of the way, and now we're seeing in Hollywood more and more on sets having disability people who are responsible to make sure that disability and accessibility are happening on set in the best way possible. And we want to see that for absolutely every set out there, and in every other environment. I hope Hollywood trickles down beyond just Hollywood. Also, it's about changing stigmas, all of this, and letting people know that people with disabilities are very capable, and I think a lot of movies have taught us either that people with disabilities are either heroic or villains or not capable or very capable, but or overly capable. But I think the most important point, which sometimes I like to show in a lot of our films, is that disability is just very normal. It's just life. And it's a human experience that everyone can relate to. Everyone has an experience of humanity, and that's something that that we really need to emphasize in our stories and in the representation of disability. And that means a person with disability doesn't have to play the disabled person. They could play anyone. They could play the rock star. They can play the annoying friend. they could be anyone that's written into the script, and we need to just open our minds a little bit and open up our systems a little bit to be further inclusive. I'm going to share my screen now for a moment to talk a little bit about how we make films more accessible specifically, and I'm going to show a PowerPoint if that's okay. This I'm going to do from the computer that I'm speaking from now. So I hope that one can share as well. And I hope I have that open in the right places. I'm not seeing my, oh, there we are, share screen, sorry. And this is a PowerPoint that we made for, we've been showing for different organizations, talking about how to make presentations more accessible. Once you've made an accessible film, which is wonderful, how to actually make it more accessible. And now I need to share my full screen. How do I do that? Slideshow, thank you. Okay, first of all, nothing about us without us, as I was mentioning. Nothing without in our community nothing should be made without a person with a disability or a disabled person. By the way, I say both. I'm kind of old school and say do person first, because I think that's something that needs that a lot of people who don't even know how to approach disability. So I think by putting person first, I think we're emphasizing the human story. But I know it's very popular these days also to put disability first, and I love that too. So that's why I switch off between them. But that inclusion is crucial. Representation in film has a long history, and we've seen a lot of films that misrepresented disability. But now in this revolutionary time, as I mentioned CODA before, we're seeing more and more films that are actually casting people with disabilities, bringing in writers. I get emails every day because I run a disability film festival and work with so many talented people that are actually doing the real work. I don't do any of the real work. I make a film festival. I don't create the films that people are doing. I try to help them make these films, but there's more demand than ever for those of you who are looking to enter that career or considering it, more demand ever for talent with disabilities. And there needs to be training. People with disabilities should be on every side of the filmmaking process. Some types of accessibility that I'd love to talk about, and this goes again into both production, post-production, and diversity and representation. So as I've been talking a little bit about the production side of accessibility and inclusion, and how films, by the way, an important element is it's not to include just one kind of disability. Disability is so diverse. Disability they say about the autism community, for whatever reason, if you've met a person with autism, you've met a person with autism, and not everyone on this huge spectrum that exists. But that's true about the spectrum of all disability. No two disabilities are the same. No two human beings are the same, I'll note. But disabilities are so diverse that it's not about, as much as possible, look for that diversity, look to include as much as possible. Where accessibility really comes in is the post-production side of things. That's the end of the filmmaking process, when you need to make your film accessible. I try to speak at a lot of film schools to film students to try to emphasize and change this culture, because there's a real culture here where disability is not only not included in the early process on the screen, but also in the post-production part of the process, which the post-production is really where you make a film accessible. And the same way you add special effects, you do color correction to a film, and there are budget lines for all of this. There needs to be a moment where you talk about, okay, now my film is getting ready for presentation. How do I make this fully accessible? And to make it fully accessible, and again, fully accessible doesn't exist. We are always learning more and aiming for more. By the way, and this is a total side note, with AI technology, there's so much going on, and there are beautiful things that are happening that are going to make the whole process more accessible in many ways. But to stay focused on post-production, having a budget line to make sure that your film has subtitles, has captions, and captions are done right. A lot of people don't like captions, which I personally love captions and watch everything with captions. I always turn the captions on, but I get it. Sometimes it's done badly. I think sometimes it can be done like like subtitles in films. And there's so many film festivals that I speak to that say, oh, we can't show captions, it'll upset our audience, but they will show foreign films with subtitles. So they're just possibly not showing it right. Obviously, this will really broaden their audience to people with hearing loss, seniors, and sometimes I just need it to follow. It helps me follow people with attention deficit like me. Sometimes that can help. It could also be bothersome for some, and I understand that. And there's some technologies that play with that too. I'll tell you one technology that I don't love, which is at some movie theaters, they give you a little screen, this happens in the theater too, that you put in the popcorn holder and the drink holder by your seat. If you have ever tried to watch a movie while looking at your drink or popcorn, you know that this was not created by a deaf person or a person with hearing loss. This clearly wasn't tested well enough, and there are better ways to do it, like there are glasses that give individualized captions, if that's one way to individualize it. But the other one is audio description. Those are the two most popular elements for captioning for accessibility. And the accessibility with audio description is, for those who are not familiar, is a description of what's being seen. This is an art form. This is something that a director, I say this about captions too, directors, people who are caring about the artistic presentation of the film, the same way you look at what this film looks like, what the colors look like, how the actors are acting. You also need to look at how your accessibility is happening and pay attention to the audio description, pay attention even in the writing process to know in the filming process where audio description needs to come in, where things might not shouldn't go too fast that you can't include audio description, and how to work around that. And if you need to make things fast, sure, there's always workarounds, and figuring it all out, but giving access to all audience members. And it needs to come to the point where, and this is something we do for Real Abilities, at first in our early years, 15 years ago, we didn't have the budget, we didn't have the know-how, and we actually didn't have the tools to create audio description for all of our films. There weren't enough audio describers in the city, believe it or not. We had to train people. And we then actually now, and so we created audio description for films about the blind community or by request. And that kind of put the onus on the viewers. We want, as noted, we want universal design. We want people to know that they could come to a festival and feel included. And therefore now we make it for absolutely, and this has been going on for years, for absolutely every film. And that's what I want to see in the public too, not just at Real Abilities, but in the public and at every other film festival. I go to a film festival that says that they're accessible, and I love to test their accessibility, not in a mean way, and see what they actually have, what they really know, what that sign up needs. And unfortunately, half the time things don't work. Half of the time things are not do work, but are not tested. So they're not being presented correctly. Half the time they don't have what they think that they have. And there needs to be a real emphasis on all of this. The biggest example, sorry to shout out on a really good festival that tries really hard, but at Sundance this year, at the Sundance Film Festival, one of the largest film festivals in America, one of their jury members was Marley Matlin, who's deaf. And one of the films, the technology didn't work and the captions didn't work. And the jury ended up leaving, and they got some bad press about that. I don't like bad press. I think, this is I understand that glitches also can happen, but there's also ways to avoid glitches. There's things that need to be done to correct, to make sure that not just for Marley Matlin, because she's an Academy Award winning star, but for every person with a disability, the efforts need to go in, and more attention. I mean, I can't tell you I work in the exhibition world, the exhibition of film world. I can't tell you how unprepared, unaware our community is in terms of accessibility. Let me also note that the whole process, if captions and audio description is not created for your film till you sell it to whatever big distributor you're dreaming to sell to, or most of the films we get for Real Abilities, which is a disability film festival, and we look for filmmakers who have disabilities. Most of the films come without captions or audio description. What this means is when they're submitting to other festivals like Sundance and even to our festival, people with disabilities can't be on the screening committee, can't be part of that jury that decides what should be shown. So it's often the case that a film about a disability is not actually being judged by a person with a disability, going back to my earlier point of nothing about us without us. And I credit to that quote to Lawrence Carter Long. And by the way, he then gives a second level to that quote. Lawrence is an advocate for disabilities and a film maven. He also says, nothing without us. It's not only what's about us without us, nothing without us. Any film doesn't have to be a disability film. It doesn't have to be a disability event. Real Abilities is going to be accessible, but every film festival should be accessible and should be including members of the community in every step of the way. I'm preachy. I'm sorry. I am very preachy today. I don't know why. I hope that's okay. I'll take a breather for some questions if that's something. If there are any, if not, I'll talk about how to best present films with accessibility. Tanya,
So far, there's nothing in the Q&A.
No questions.
But as a reminder, everyone, feel free to submit any questions in the Q&A. No worries.
I will go on. So, event accessibility. We have here a little list of some of the things. As I've said before, accessibility is something that's always evolving. I love watching it evolve, and there's always more ways to make things accessible. So this is not a finite list. But I mentioned captions, audio description. Those are the two popular ones. I want to say that you'll throw in there, we'll mention soon, ASL. We have ASL right now. ASL gets a lot of attention. Captions, live captions, as some of you can use for this event right now. The live captions are equally crucial, if not more so. There's actually a larger population with hearing loss than deaf. It's not a competition. There should be both, and as much as possible. And we try to make that available for all of our events. The deaf and hearing loss community definitely gets a lot of visibility. Here's a little interesting anecdote. When we get hundreds of submissions to our festival and we watch all these films, there's a very high representation of the deaf community in film. Which is very interesting. My explanation for this, beyond there being possibly a good lobby for it, is that it's visual. The deaf community, because they express themselves in sign language, that's a visual thing which translates to film very nicely. Also, specifically, ASL, American Sign Language, incorporates a lot of not just gestures but facial expressions. And where is our ASL interpreter? I'm missing. I'm sure it's here somewhere. But as a good example, as you can see. And that, I think, leads to knowing some acting and directing too. It kind of creates a good space for it and a good translation to film. So that's just one interesting anecdote. I'll mention as I'm on this tangent. I'll mention the other two disabilities that are highly represented are autism. Seems to get some more representation these days, which is good to see and something that we need to pay more attention to as well. And cerebral palsy, for whatever reason, we see a lot of films on those topics. Just so you know which topics are out there. In Real Abilities, we try to choose a diverse representation in film. So it's not all of our films. We can make a whole film festival just on the deaf, autism, and cerebral palsy communities. We try to choose as many different disabilities as possible and as diverse as possible, and even try to spread it, to cast as wide of a net as possible by including disabilities that, some might say, oh, it's not a disability, is a disability. We have a film this year at our festival about Lyme disease, definitely a disability, definitely not getting the right kind of attention, definitely impacting across the US in such a dangerous way that we really need to raise awareness to things like that. But that's just a little side note. Venues in space. Let's talk about accessible venues in space. This is something that the ADA keeps improving. It's interesting. Our main auditorium, which is at the JCC in Manhattan, was just had a major renovation, which allowed us, first of all, and one of the reasons we wanted to do it was to make our space more accessible. The ADA requires you to be as accessible as you were when the space was built, and sometimes beyond. It's a little bit more complicated, but thinking about spaces of them being more accessible. In the picture that's on the screen right now, we're seeing the space called the IAC building, where we did our opening night last year. This is on the West Side Highway. It's a beautiful building. I forget the name of the architect that you can't miss it because it really stands out. But what we loved about the space is not only that it's universally designed, meaning in a lot of our spaces, oh yes, we're fully accessible. We have an elevator for people. One of them I like to point out is the New York Times building has a event space, and there, yes, they have an elevator. It's on the side, so everybody walks down the main stairs in this big stairway. But if you're in a wheelchair, please step to the side to a small elevator that will move very slowly. So universal design is really the way to go, and the best way to do it. No offense to the New York Times building, which is a wonderful screening space. The space itself is open. It's not we used it, even though it's not a traditional screening space. It's not a theater. And we try to make Real Abilities a real film festival in a theater. So you're having a theatrical experience. So they're not saying that this is a disability experience. We want everybody to come. We don't want just the disability community to come and people who need the accessibility. We want the people we really need to teach. People with disabilities know about accessibility and how little of it exists. It's everyone else. And that's, we try to bring them in with the great movies, and by showing it in a cinematic way, in a fun theatrical setting, and try to choose movies that will speak to absolutely everyone. But here we chosen a location that was not a traditional theatrical setting. It's happened to be then the headquarters for Vimeo, for those who like watching Vimeo movies, and we love their work. And it really, what it allowed was, it was kind of a space that we can reinvent and create more access for, and take as many chairs out as we needed. In our screenings, we get dozens. I think the ADA, I'm trying to remember the percentage that they require for wheelchair seating, but that doesn't fit for us. We need a higher percentage than that, and in general, having that kind of flexibility in seating will allow for everyone with a wheelchair to have the right kind of space. And it's not just, again, in the back or on the side or in a special row, but rather completely involved with everyone. We use here a flat space, so it's actually a seating space where it's, again, I mean. It's very, I know we have a very imperfect system, and a lot of our theaters have to do this. And my theater, our main theater, has to do this too, where often the people in wheelchairs have to sit either in the back or the front. And we like it completely integrated. And that's kind of the standard of today. So that's inclusive seating. having not just an ASL interpreter, or I actually feel that having, and no offense to our wonderful interpreters here, CART, which is the live captioning for your conversations. So it's not just that the movie that you're showing, I mean, this goes into the classroom too. You might be showing a movie that's accessible, but if the rest of the class is not accessible, how did that wasn't a fully inclusive experience. I'll also say that a lot of people now use looping devices, hearing aids that can connect to the sound system through Bluetooth and other technologies, and that's something that also needs to go throughout. I go to movie theaters sometimes where the movie, the people who are using their hearing aids or listening devices can have access to the movie, but then don't have access to the rest of the program because the rest of the program doesn't go through that same soundboard. I know it sounds very technical, but it just doesn't. The point I'm trying to make is that every part of it needs to be accessible. And needs to be available to everybody, and not just the film experience. So on the classroom level, make sure that that's happening throughout. And a lot of I get a lot of requests for this. I know a lot of teachers and professors love showing movies and love using media. Make sure it's accessible. Make sure that if it's accessible, and that the rest of the process is accessible as well. Clear signage, we note, and clear signage is something that's very important. My favorite is when there's a sign that says, pick up your audio description device here. And audio description is for the blind community. I hope you all get the irony there, that that the sign is actually not something that a blind person can access. Of course, it does help if they're coming with somebody who's helping them, but and there might be some good intentions there. But to have signage that is accessible to everyone. One of the additions that we added for the first time this year for Real Abilities is we created easily visual signs. So to help people communicate. Oh, I need water. They can point to the side. Where's the bathrooms? Where do I pick up my device? How do I enter? To be able to make sure that all of our staff can communicate with anyone. And by the way, this is not just people with hearing loss, deafness, or blind or visual loss, or visually impaired. It's for people sometimes with cognitive disabilities and learning disabilities and verbal disabilities. These are I mean, I've been luckily exposed in these last 15 years of Real Abilities to people with disabilities that are completely forgotten and would go under the radar, that you would never even know. And there's really something there's so much out there that it's really important to keep to pay attention to everything. And the most important rule, and now I'm giving the most important rule of this session that's possibly not even on this list: kindness, patience. These are the two things that will really make you more accessible. Because even if you don't have the accessibility aid, and again, we're always learning and looking for new ways to be accessible, to show kindness and patience, I think goes a very, very long way, and is the best way. A lot of the times I see it constantly. You're running an event, you got a lot of things going on. There are a lot of moving parts. You're not taking the time to actually pay attention to the person, and to give them the attention that they need, and to try to help them in the best way, and to do it in the kindest way, as opposed to in a defensive way. Oh no, somebody found something in our festival that was not accessible to them. I'm not going to get defensive. I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to say we're going to try harder, and know that we're all imperfect, especially people who run film festivals. I mentioned the hearing assist loop, having braille materials, sensory friendly spaces is something that we've included in our spaces as much as possible, and is applauded and used. Creating spaces, I mean, especially in the film world, there are sensory issues, and that's something that creating a space where people can have a quiet moment, where can get away from all the stimulation that exists in our world. And there's so much stimulation everywhere now. I don't understand how people walk down the street or drive down the street with all the electric signs that are up now in the city, and how our city really approves those on an accessibility level. There's splashing lights constantly, and having sensory friendly spaces is something that more and more is going to be just a blessed thing for absolutely everyone. We all need to take breaks from the oversensory experiences that we have, that is called, 21st century life. Visual stories, finding ways to make everything more accessible for the people with learning disabilities. I, by the way, am in this field only because I have a learning disability and I'm a visual learner. Give me the visual story. Don't give me a big page with a lot of words on it. I'm going to be lost. Visual stories are crucial, of course, also for people with all different kinds of developmental disabilities, cognitive disabilities, you name it. Having those visual stories there is fantastic. I've gone to events where there's actually also a visual storytelling a soundtrack, so people can follow the story in a better way for a film, which is just wonderful to me. Having an accessibility desk is something that we started doing. Having a place to go. This goes for, you don't have to run a film festival. It could go in any university setting. And I know there's disability offices everywhere. I was one of your visitors. By the way, I would have to take my test there, which I'm sure today, since everyone has computers, you can take it. You should take it with everyone else. Sometimes I needed a quiet space because of my attention deficit, which was also helpful. But having that space where people can go, so their individualized need can be attended to, and for people to be knowledgeable. I mean, we sometimes have our interns and volunteers running that desk, and we try to train them as well as possible, but also we train them to be patient, to be kind, and to ask. Sometimes we don't know the answers, and we need to bring somebody else in to be able to help. Flexibility, flexible stage and speaker setup. I love it. And I love to give this example. One very, very fancy space, I won't mention the name, got really excited about their accessibility. And what they built was a stage that goes up and down automatically. How cool is that, right? And I don't know how many millions of dollars they spent on it. But what that meant is, for a diverse panel that had people who were in wheelchairs and people who were not, it meant that the person in the wheelchair had to get onto the stage before the event so they could raise it, because they wanted the stage to be raised. And that person just had to sit there until they introduced the rest of the panel. So having that kind of thinking more in terms of flexibility and inclusion, in terms of really being able to move things around. And again, this picture here that I have of the space in Vimeo was something like that. By the way, I'll share the story that night, opening night of our festival, we had talked about all of our accessibility needs, of course, and things in production always go wrong. But we discovered that the stage was not accessible. The ramp was not working, and they had to build a ramp on the spot. And this takes both money, tools, time, the right kind of people, the right kind of resources. And it's just something to think about, to plan as much in advance. And even when things go wrong, to really have as many resources and as much goodwill there at the time. You're actually seeing the pictures taken from the side with the stairs. There's a ramp on the other side. And I tried to use the other side as much as possible, even though I'm not in a wheelchair. I will stop sharing my screen now and give a moment for questions. I saw a couple of questions came up. Tanya?
Yes, we have a few things in the Q&A. First, someone is asking if it's possible for you to have a copy or to share a copy of your PowerPoint.
I think we could do that.
Okay. Sounds good. And a question we have is, do you think every instance of a Broadway show should have audio description? Often, if a show has audio description, it is restricted to 1 or 2 dates. Is that inclusive? It certainly will cost a lot to have audio description at every showing.
So as you know, I believe in kindness. So even though I've made fun of a few organizations here, I think it's actually, I applaud every effort that Broadway is doing. And there's technology that's allowing it to be done pretty much everywhere. It costs a lot. It's not, I mean, a small off-Broadway theater will not be able to always create the kind of accessibility that makes it as open as possible for everyone. But there are technologies out there for the big Broadway shows that are definitely available. We work with an organization. We're having this year during our festival, we're having a summit about that we started last year, kind of about everything we're talking about here, accessibility in the industry. But we're taking it to another level this year, thanks to the Mayor's Office for Media and Entertainment, where they asked us to include all performing arts. So it's not just going to be about film, but about theater and dance and music as well, and other general performing arts. And that means that, so we're having an organization called Gala Pro, which creates the accessibility for a lot of the big Broadway shows. And there's audio description and captions. Audio, and like a little caption device between you and me here. I know we're being recorded, but again, I don't love the devices. I think a glasses system could be cooler and work better, or finding other ways to make it easier to see the captions. This one's given them kind of like a phone device. But audio description is an art form, as I mentioned, and there's different ways and different philosophies on how to do it. And a lot of the audio description, sometimes I watch it on Netflix, I turn it on sometimes, and sometimes audio description gets really lazy. A man enters a room. That's it. That was your audio description for the whole show. I guess they do it probably every scene, if I remember correctly. Some audio description gets into it. The idea of audio description in my philosophy is to be as objective as possible, objectively describe, but also not be intrusive, as least intrusive as possible. But there's other ways of doing audio description, and that's something that happens in different ways. And I understand all of the technological obstacles that lead to it, and also just the cost, the financial obstacles that lead to it. And but there are laws that require making things as accessible as possible with audio description. The last thing I wanted to mention about audio description was also, of course, yes, having it available in spaces is wonderful, knowing that there's limitations also in how to present it. Having the audio, I can't tell you how hard it is for a lot of our locations to actually have the audio description available. Just for a technological reason, if you don't screen in the right kind of format, it might not be there. And we've really had to train a lot of spaces to do it right. One exciting thing that I believe is happening in technology that I'd love to share is that I've seen technology. I saw this on the news the other night, that technology you can give word commands to create a visual, a video. So you could say, I want to see a rabbit with purple ears jumping up and down, and it can create that, which means that they can do the opposite. Technology, this is all with the AI technology. Technology should be able to give the opposite. So if you're seeing a rabbit on screen with purple ears jumping up and down, it can write that out, but of course also verbalize it, which means that we're not far from having audio description be something that's done through computers, for better and for worse. I'll take a moment. We're at noon, and I know we have a little more time. I'll take a moment just to share a little bit about, of course, I'm happy to take any more questions, share a little bit more about real abilities. And first of all, to say that you are all welcome, and I know you've been given access through a code. There's RFF CUNY 20, which gives you 20% off. I say all students should get a bigger discount. Any student who needs free tickets, we provide that. We provide accessibility in every way. So it's also everyone should be able to see these films. And I also created a student 50 code for 50% off of all screenings at the JCC in person or virtually. So we've made our festival. We used to do it we once did it one year in over 40 locations throughout the New York metro area to be more accessible, geographically accessible. The person in Queens might have trouble getting into a theater in Manhattan. when the pandemic hit, we, for the first time, had our first virtual festival. We transitioned very quickly, and we're kind of testing out new technology. Something, by the way, we didn't show films on Zoom, but had all of our conversations on Zoom. Every film we follow with the conversation to really take the messages a little deeper and not just leave things up on the screen. And for us to process, but to process together and to create community. So when we went virtual for the first time, we got all these emails from people saying how much they've wanted to attend all these years and weren't able to for accessibility purposes. They either can't leave their house, they can't get to Real Abilities in whatever locations we were. We weren't absolutely everywhere, and that means that we want to keep this virtual element for as long as possible. So this year we're running in person. And again, I love the community. I love bringing the community together. I think that the in-person experience is irreplaceable, but also want to be as accessible as possible. And we're keeping therefore almost all of our films virtual as well. One said no. My guess is in the future, more films will say no. A lot of people are starting to hold back on on the virtual element, but maybe the pandemic changed something for the better, and we'll be able to really provide that going forward for the future, but we're doing it this year. So that code, student50, is good for all virtual and all screenings at the Real Abilities main location, which is the JCC in Manhattan, excluding opening night, which is tonight, which is sold out. A good thing and a bad thing. But all the films also are being presented in other locations in all 5 boroughs. We make sure of that. So any of you who are in a different borough, every film gets repeated in a different borough, in a different setting. So check those all out. I'm sorry that not all the films, this is something that I'm aiming for, that all the films will screen in every borough. By the way, I have to say, I run a few different film festivals, not just a disability film festival. And this is our hardest sell. People don't want to come to movies about disabilities. People I hear from the disability community, I live it. Why would I want to see the movie? Why? Because you want to see yourself on the screen, because you want to see your experience, because this is finally a movie that you can relate to, and it's finally an environment that's completely accessible. So come out and bring your friends, because this is something, I mean, the mainstream is also something. Bring your friends who are non-disabled or don't realize that they have a disability, or don't realize that someday they might have a disability, or definitely have a lot of friends with disabilities. So bring as many people out as possible and help us spread the word. You can go to realabilities.org. That's REEL, realabilities.org/New York. We're also in our festival after New York runs in dozens of cities across the US, into Mexico, into Canada. We're always happy to spread these amazing films and messages to other communities as well. So anywhere that wants to start a Real Abilities Festival, we have a franchise, and I promise we don't take any kickbacks. We make it accessible and give it packaged really nicely, and allow for every city also, you should know, to also have their own individuality. Not every city is New York and likes the same kind of films that we liked. So we give some space for other films to be presented. You should know also all of our codes for discounted access are all lowercase also, so it's easier to put in. And please check out all of our events. Our events go beyond just the films. We have a comedy night at the Gotham Comedy Club. We have, as I mentioned, our industry summit running on May 1st and 2nd throughout the days. We open up, because we have the theater reserved for the week, we take our afternoons or mornings and screen for schools. We have school screenings during the days, and always happy to do that for universities as well. Check out all the different locations. We're not just in one location. And of course, other events. We're honoring, one event that I wanted to mention, we're honoring Judith Human, who passed away last month, and we wouldn't be here without her. And she was a good friend of the festivals, and really an advocate that has changed so much for all of us here in New York and across the country. So please join us for Beyond the Films, for the events. And if you're that one person who doesn't like movies, we'll have something for you too. There's something really for everyone. Questions? I'll pause. How can students get free tickets? there on our website, if you go to the accessibility elements, one of the spaces for accessibility is financial accessibility, and we'll give everyone a free code for tickets. So so check that out. I'll actually set up another code. Let's make this easy. I'm setting up a code now called student free. Give me a few minutes till we finish I'm on the next session too. So give me a couple of hours, and student free will give free tickets as well. What we do like is, please, if you're buying an in-person ticket, show up, because you might be taking a ticket from somebody else, and show up in general because we want to see you, and feel free to say hi if I'm there, and introduce yourselves. Any chance of coming out to California? We used to have a Northern California location, and San Francisco. We're hoping to bring that one back. The pandemic unfortunately hurt a lot of our locations, and we lost quite a few locations during the pandemic. Resources just weren't there, and being shared differently. So we hope to bring that one back. We do have one in LA that's run there by the mayor's office for disabilities. We're starting one in San Diego as well. And yes, the Bay Area, including Berkeley, should definitely have one. There is a wonderful, we also don't like to step on toes. There is a wonderful, one other, I'd say even more progressive than us film festival, as Berkeley's tends to be, in Berkeley, called Superfest, which actually shows their films with open audio description. I've heard. I've never actually attended it, but I'd like to one day. Kind of puts it more, I'd say, if to compare, Real Abilities aims to be a more mainstream film festival that kind of connects to the film festival world. While I'd say that Superfest, wonderful festival, is really about the disability community in a different way. And only, I'd say, by showing audio description, live audio description is an example of how that kind of runs and really speaks to a community specifically. How is casting for the films done? Also, how do you choose which films to support? Wonderful question. So casting for films is, of course, the filmmakers and the producers do the castings for these films, for all their films, and some of them search really hard, and we applaud that. In our submissions, when you submit your film to Real Abilities, there's a question there of how. The question is how is your film made with people with disabilities? There's a few different questions in the form that relate to disability inclusion in your process, and some have really good intentions, and I applaud all good intentions. But sometimes our committee will say not enough has been done to look for an actor with a disability, and get the word out there. There are so many hungry actors with disabilities who are excluded from so many roles. If you're finally making a movie about a person with a disability, you can find them mostly. There's always gray areas. In terms of how we select our films, I love this. We have grown to, we get hundreds of submissions. We have, which is wonderful. The hardest part of my job is I have to say no to great films. We don't have room for all the great films. We look for films that are, of course, about disability, have high production standards, are a great story, are a human story, and are made responsibly, authentically with the community. And luckily enough, there's a lot of those and a lot of good ones that we have to say no to, which is an amazing problem to have. Sadly, I'll say that a lot of these films, if they're not taken to our festival, don't necessarily go anywhere else. What I'm so happy about in terms of the festival spreading across the country, and by the way, on our website, somebody asked about the California film festivals. On our website, on realabilities.org, there's a drop down for all the different cities that have festivals, but we go beyond the festivals. We do a taste of Real Abilities in spaces that can't put on a film festival. We'll just do a screening elsewhere when somebody comes to us requesting a screening on a topic, and we got a film about everything. So it's all there, and we love it that a lot of our films now actually get a kind of distributions, because they don't just play in New York. Hopefully they'll play in every other city, and that gives more eyeballs. We also try to get these films then distributed and to distributors and offer this package. We've created now audio description and captioning for this film. You have full accessibility. Now the hard part is to get people to show it with that accessibility. You're good, and we tell the directors, you're going to another film festival, ask them to show it with the captions, ask them to include the accessibility. We've given you this gift. Please make sure that people use it. The last thing I was going to mention in terms of how we select our films, we have a committee that's an extremely diverse committee. We have experts who help guide us. So if there's a disability that's not included on our committee, and by the way, just because we have one person with a disability, with a certain kind of disability, doesn't mean they represent that disability. So we try to get it out to partners, to organizations, and kind of get some approvals to make sure that everything we screen is on the up and up. And people who are from the film world, so they know film, love film, can understand the quality of the films and good storytelling. And we have 3 different levels. And by the way, we're always looking for people to join some of the levels. We have a screening committee who views. We have a selection committee who films that have been viewed move up to them to kind of, say in and out, make some of the hard part. And then we actually bring people from our experts and people from all around the country to be a part of that final process of many of our partners to kind of, okay, we have here now, I'm going to make up a number, 50 wonderful films. We need to cut this down into 25 because that's all the slots that we have. We actually, I think, have 40 films, and usually the list is 70 if you want to be accurate. And let's hear your votes. Let's see what you can do to help, do this. You might not have to watch every film, but watch one film and help us kind of see how this film is responding. We love people who are also not from the film industry. So it's not just us film snobs who are watching the movies, and people who are just like, I like, my movies, like in the most basic way and less artistic, and to make sure we have a voice for everyone. And then we also play a little bit of a balancing act of like, oh, you know what? We have too many films on one disability. We're going to have to cut that film and make room for another kind of disability. We have too many dramas and we want a comedy. Let's push that comedy up a little bit more. And things like that. I hope that helps. Do you reach out to colleges and spread word on campuses? We try to. We partner with over 100 organizations. Partnering is free. Partnering is beneficial. We give discounts. We just did an event with City College, and I don't know if any of the folks there are representing, try to include colleges as much as possible. We also screen sometimes as college campuses. We try to, college campuses that are open to the public. We try to do screenings there during the festival. Manhattan College is one that's doing one this year. I'm sure there are others that I'm forgetting, but I don't manage every location, but there's a lot of outreach to colleges and to other partners, and we would love to see more college participation. We used to screen at a few other CUNY schools as well, I remember, over the years. So people who can do it. We've also since then have raised the bar on accessibility. We used to be like, okay, you can't do audio description, fine. No, we got in trouble for that. And it's not because of the trouble. We want all of our locations to be able to screen in a quality way. We want to try our filmmakers come into one screening space that was just, screened on a small TV screen. And we want to give that full cinematic experience and accessibility experience through Real Abilities. And accessibility. I mentioned accessibility, that too. Any other questions or comments?
See one question. I'm not sure if this was covered already, but someone is asking, is there info for California on the website?
So I mentioned Real Abilities goes to Real Abilities for New York, you go to realabilities.org/New York. But for our main site is realabilities.org, and there's a drop down. And I think on every page there's a drop down for other cities as well that are having their actual festivals, and they run throughout the year at different times. So please check that out. Please contact us to bring it to your city. Yeah, I've been asked, what's your goal? Our goal, we have 2 goals. One, to be obsolete. So disability films are everywhere and being done correctly and inclusive and completely accessible. that you don't need a disability film festival anymore. Though I think there'll always be a place to celebrate our community in a pride kind of way. And then the other goal is to be, in as many places as possible. It's grown really in a very grassroots, organic kind of way. But we're looking to invest more in allowing it to grow into as many spaces as possible, so people can access these films. And I should share, we're about to launch a streaming site for a lot of our past films, so people can watch some of the past films, because we have so many gems that sit there on the shelf that are not being screened anywhere else. So excited to do it. Is there any easy way, I'm reading a question, is there any easy way to see a list of films screening online, meaning your lists out of the virtual info without in-person locations? So for this year, our Real Abilities New York running this week, most of them are, I think, all but one. It's a short film, the one that's not screening online. So it's really almost everything. Act of God, I think, is the only one that's not screening online. We do also have sometimes some geographical restrictions. This all comes from the distributors. Sometimes films can't be screened outside of the New York metro area. So because they're waiting on premiere statuses, there's a lot of politics involved in film presenting. And but most of them, some are available nationally, and that's all on the website, and you can definitely check those out there. Of course, for a list of all of our past films, this is something that I love. We have, I'm on this page more than anything else, and probably more than anyone else, on our website. You're going to be mostly going to the New York site for us New Yorkers here, but if you go to realabilities.org, there's a film database of, I believe, all of our past films. I think some have been missed within the shuffle, but 99% of our films are there, and you could sort by category, genre, disability, and really find films about absolutely everything. Another emphasis that we've been doing these last few years is, I mean, it was happening naturally, but now we're putting an emphasis on really including as many other minority populations as possible, and making our festival even more diverse in different ways. So that's something that can be looked for there. And sometimes we'll screen our films in an organization, not under the disability hat. Sometimes there'll be an employee resource group that is just looking for a good film. And film is education. I believe that film is education. Film changes people, film changes your brain, impacts your heart, has such a strong way of expression that this is education. So to bring it into educational facilities and into the workplace is crucial as well. And we'll show a film because it's about a woman's topic, and we'll find a film, and it just happens to be also because you're talking about one specific topic doesn't mean that disability should be, if you're talking especially about another minority population, doesn't mean that disability should be excluded for that. That's the beauty of disability, is that it's included in every other minority population too. I'm taking a water break. This is your chance to voice up. Tell me what you thought about the film. Tell me what you thought, if this was helpful to you, and anything else you might want to know about presenting films in a more accessible way and making our whole industry more accessible. And again, that hand in hand, this is, if you want to know why I really do this film festival, is I believe, beyond all of my connections, I believe in what I said before as far as disability being about film being education. Film is how I learn. Film is, I think, how people learn, how we create our society and our culture, and we want to use that very, very powerful tool. And I hope everyone has that one film that has changed their life. And I remember the film that I saw in school in second grade, The Red Balloon, changed my life. I don't know how many of you have seen the film, The Red Balloon. It's a 1950s French film that's silent. That's why we were able to watch it. And that's all I remember from second grade. So and it has, taught me a lesson, not just about accessibility and about inclusion, but also about bullying and about beauty and art, and it stays with you in such an impactful way. So please see this as a way to look at education too. I see a question or a
We
comment.
have one comment, yes. They're saying Queens College has a disability festival day every summer. This would be a great way to see, or this would be great to see you become part of this event. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. And happy to be a part of, I try to make myself as accessible as possible. I can sleep as little as possible. Sleep is important. And always happy to have myself or someone from our team available, and at least also the films or something. That's the beauty of film too, is that as opposed to theater or other art forms, it can be replicated everywhere and can be just presented. We could send a file and it's that easy. So always happy to participate. And please join us for more on accessibility. Of course, our summit is another thing to look at. And if you go to realabilities.org/summit, you'll have there more information about our 2-day summit this week, May 1st and 2nd. Again, we want to make it as free as possible. So please, it's about attending, and that's going to be both in person and virtual as well.
Perfect, thank you. If there are no more questions, which I don't see any in the Q&A, technically we are now in our lunch hour. So if you'd like to stick around, we will be showing some short films from the Real Abilities Film Festival. We have 3 here today. The first one is called How Much Am I Worth? The second one is called Freebird. And the third one is called Amy Victoria. May or may not be shown in that order. But if you'd like to stick around, eat your lunch, and watch some short films, feel free to.
Thank you all. You'll get a little bit more of me, but I'll try to let the films speak for themselves too. And would love to hear also comments and reactions to films. Films is that's the beauty of a film festival. You get to interact too. It's not just a one-sided art form anymore.
And if you'd like to voice any comments, you can use the raise hand feature, and we will allow for you to speak.
I'll put in the chat also. I don't know if everybody got realabilities.org/New York. I hope I spelled it correctly. And that's where you'll find more info. Thank you for allowing me to make so many commercials here. Thank you for doing this and including me.
No, thank you. We really enjoyed your presentation and that short film you showed at the beginning, especially with that comment, check your assumptions. Yeah, I noticed the chat was going off, and it was great.
Every line in that film, I'm telling you, I've seen it so many times. Every line in that film has so much in it. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
No, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
So whenever
I love to point in that film also who has the power there. She holds all the power. She has taken, it's her voice. She has control over that situation and flips everything of traditional Hollywood settings on its head.
Absolutely. And so whenever you're ready, we can start with the screenings.
Great. We'll jump right into it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm happy to start with the screenings. I have to do this on my other computer in the best way possible. So we're going to watch 3 films as mentioned, and just need to click for a moment. And I'm going to share each film, but wanted to introduce each one. I also wanted to share, for these, I do have audio described versions, and I'm happy to share those links. I guess the best way to do it is to share it in the chat. So if you want to, I'll share all 3. So if you want to watch them on your own with audio description, and for those of you who just want a taste of audio description, that's another way to do it. So I'll put that in there because it's available, and for those who want it, you can have it. Otherwise, we'll be watching open caption version. I'm sorry, my computer is not completely cooperating. Here we go. And our first film, I'm going to start with Freebird because that's what I have open first. Freebird was a film about touches on Down syndrome. as a disability. But what's important to note about this film is also, like most of our films, it was really made in collaboration with that community. This one's kind of a music video genre-wise. It's but it tells a story very specifically and uses animation, which is also a great tool, which can be more inclusive at times. And let me share my screen. Beautiful, right? Beautiful film. I have to admit, at Real Abilities, we try to stay away from inspirational films and what some people refer to as inspiration porn. I know that disability is often used for that in film, and there's nothing wrong with some emotion, and there's nothing wrong with I actually love being inspired too by things, but really this is just a beautiful film that was made with the community, co-directed by a person with Down syndrome, and the full process was created by people with disabilities. So I really applaud it, and emotionally it's just beautiful and speaks. Again, our festival tries to speak not just to the insiders, but the outsiders as well. I love talking about films. So if anybody has questions about the films, I know we're eating lunch, so don't choke. But if you want to put any questions out there, where I'm happy to also take and hear opinions and discuss, and definitely can do that as well. Also, during the film, I was diligently placing the links for all the audio description versions of the 3 films that we're going to watch in the chat. And there's so much to say. These are short films, and there's so much to say. I bring them to organizations, and we can talk an hour easily about each film individually, and there's really a lot to say in terms of like every detail that we can look into, both on how it's made, but also within the narrative itself. And this one, a beautiful story about parenting, I think, and giving freedom and adulthood with disability, and a lot of the big questions that come along, and a lot of the assumptions that exist that need to be broken, and find your freedom, as the song said. So I'm going to jump into our next film. And once again, try to do this technologically correctly. And before I realized I was on mute when I was explaining that, I accidentally clicked on the audio description version. So you all got a little taste of the audio description before. But let me queue up our next film. These are 3. And by the way, we'll be finished, I think, a little early to allow people to speak, rest, take a break. Because we'll probably be done with these 3 films shortly. What is going on with my computer? I'm working on 2 different computers for all of this, so bear with me. I'm not that computer illiterate, but taking me a moment sometimes. And
if you need me to share anything, you can let me know.
Thank you. I'm almost there, and I set it all up in advance, but of course, I see the problem. The last video was still on, so it was blocking my screen. But our next film is called How Much Am I Worth? This was made by actually something called the Disability Film Challenge, which is run by Easter Seals out in California, and is used to be a 48-hour challenge, one of those 48-hour, like make a movie in 48 hours about a certain topic kind of challenge. And that's not the way to make a movie, but a way to get a lot of movies done. And some of them are really nice, and they've given now a little more. I think now it's 72 hours, and we try to take films from that process every year. And it's a really great way for new voices to start to find their way, and they get a lot of nice attention. How Much Am I Worth challenges our whole medical system and our insurance system in terms of physical disabilities, and specifically amputees and getting prosthetics. You'll learn more about it. The filmmaker and one of the people featured in the film is Rachel Handler, who is actually a well-known mainstream actress. You look her up on IMDb, and you'll see she's been working the pavement and really getting a lot of roles, and is an amputee. And what I love is when she stars in roles that aren't about her being an amputee, but simply just roles. You'll learn more about her through the film, and let me share that with you now. Thank you. I'm glad. I'm seeing a lot of hearts for that one. And it gave me a moment also to read some of the things you wrote and to take a bite of food. I'm hungry for lunch too. I don't want to disturb your lunches too much. We have one more film. I do want to say I like to give my commentary about every film. This film, of course, also, again, specifically, even though it's a documentary in a different genre that we haven't seen right now, is another form of just like how film can be impactful and how film can be a great tool for change. And I think this film really has its message out there and makes it very clear, and even in I don't know how many 72 hours managed to make a beautiful film that touches on an important topic that is probably most people don't know. I have to say, for whatever reason, it's a topic. It's a very popular film for Real Abilities. This one, and I guess taking on the big insurance companies might be in our healthcare system might be one of the reasons it gets some a lot of views. But a wonderful film with a lot of great messages and connects back to art as well. So I love that. Any other thoughts and comments from you? Happy to share. And we have one more film to share for you, which is Amy Victoria. Amy Victoria screened at our film festival last year, and of course, I have to say these last two films that you saw, actually, I think all three of them were made during COVID too, which adds another element to it. Is this film, Amy Victoria, relates to the deaf community and is really a very internal, small film that was made within the community. And this director, kind of just like during COVID, was so isolated and started to use that isolation. It's like, let's figure out how to make some good films here and tell some stories. So I am happy to share that one. I'm going to leave you at that. I'm going to let you eat your lunch, enjoy the film. We'll stop it when the film's over, and happy to take any comments in the chat. But I want to thank you all again, and thank you for doing this amazing summit conference. And I hope you can join for more. And I think this collaboration with Real Abilities is a really beautiful thing as far as the timing, and a good way to take a deeper dive after all these amazing sessions that you're going to have in these next days. So thank you all for being part of this community. Let me share.